When I ask my students what they want to work on in class, no matter what their answer is, I try and take a four-part approach to really getting to the root of their pain or discomfort or stiffness. And I'll talk to you about that four-part approach that involves more than just stretching. I'm going to be using the shoulders as an example because that's a really common place that people need to work on. You might want a yoga strap. If you don't have one, no worries, you can do it without. So many things serve as a substitute: a belt, a scarf, anything that you can hold long, towel, bag, blanket towel. Blanket towel, single greatest tool you've had. I've said that before, but blanket towel is awesome. So when we get into the shoulders, when we get into anything, we want to think about mobility, range of motion. Our shoulders can be a delicate joint. They're a little fussy. Anyone who's had issues with their rotator cuff knows this. But with a strap, and you can play with how wide your arms are, kind of depending. You bring them out in front, bring them up overhead. See how far back you can get them without really seriously bending into your elbows. You might need to go wider on the strap. Bring hands overhead. See how I'm taking my shoulders in a rotation. Try and keep your core engaged. That's a point of reference I like to bring out a lot. Sometimes we sit up tall or our chest puffs out when we're doing shoulder work, and it might feel like some serious arcing in your lower back. But if you engage your core, you're strengthening up those deep muscles, preventing that arcing. So this is shoulder flossing. Playing around with the range of motion in our shoulders and making sure our joints are good and loosened up. If our joints are stiff or achy in day-to-day life, does not do a whole lot for our range of motion, right? We're not usually bringing our arms up and overhead unless we work certain careers. If we try and go right into stretches, we're going to be compensating for the fact that our joints are not lubricated and warmed up. So something, again, that brings the range of motion into your joints. So we'll put the strap aside. We are flossed up, ready to go. We might take a couple rotations, just really feel what's going on in our shoulders. Then we'll come to hands and knees. Cat and cow serve a very similar purpose. They warm up your spine. Again, especially those of us who have very stationary jobs, the spine might not be getting a lot of warm up. So we're inhaling, lifting, exhaling, and arcing. We'll take 2 more rounds. All right, so now that we are sufficiently warmed up, we come back to neutral. After mobility exercise, I really like counterbalance. I'm going to sit up for just a second to demonstrate. A lot of our day-to-day lives, if we're drivers, if we're office workers, even if we have hobbies like knitting or reading, our shoulders are tending to do this. We're hunching over. We are overextending our middle trap. We're tightening up our chest and our neck. And even though we might feel really achy in our shoulders, that's from overuse. So when I talk about counterbalance, now that our shoulders are good and warmed up, hips stay stacked over knees, we walk our hands forward. One of my absolute favorite poses, Anahatasana. Your forehead can be on the mat, especially if this pose is pretty new to you. You could put your chin on the mat. That's going to bring your heart a little closer. And Anahata is heart, so it is heart pose. Sometimes we call it heart melting or extended puppy dog. But it opens up the chest, gives us that wonderful counter to that day-to-day that might have our shoulders sloping forward. Really great for our posture. And it's a yin pose, so it's kind of meant to be held. So we'll inhale, come up, back to our table. I always like to take time to neutralize in between poses. It can be really jarring to go into the opposite. So sometimes it can be fun to switch your hips over to the side, have a peek back at that hip. This is horse biting tail. It's more lower back focus because it gets into our stabilizer muscles in the side body. Bring it through center. Come to the left. Center. So then after we do our mobility, our counterbalance to get things open, now we're going to get the most benefit with stabilizing some of our overstretched muscles. Strength and stabilization. We want our muscles strong and engaged and supportive. So a couple of exercises that can be really nice. Here's where you might want your blanket and towel underneath your rib cage. You come to prone. This can be really supportive to the chest under the rib cage. You certainly don't have to use it. I've seen people take this two ways. With the toes curled under, my preference is cobra style, pressing the tops of my feet into the mat. We've got options again here. My preference is resting forehead to the mat. You can most certainly pick your head up, especially if that feels like you're engaging and stabilizing the neck. But if it feels like strain, forehead down. So we take our arms, kind of bring them into two right angles, sort of a W pose. Palms are down. We're inhaling, lifting. You should feel your shoulder blades coming together. Dropping the hands. Inhale, lifting. We're moving nice and slow. We're finding that engagement of the middle trapezius, the place that gets overstretched in our day-to-day, or at least has a tendency to. So we're re-engaging this muscle. We're stabilizing it. We're correcting some of that overstretch. I think for a lot of my students, they feel, or they say they feel the most relief here. Because you're bringing heat to those muscles. You're kind of tackling the pain in a form of self-massage, bringing blood to that area. The next time we inhale up, we're going to hold. We're going to draw our shoulder blades together, create all that wonderful heat in the back. That's just going to get right into our soreness. We'll take our hands down. We'll come back up to our table. How are you feeling? We take a moment to neutralize, nothing ever jarring to the spine. Then we might explore just a little cat-cow rinse. Exhaling as you arc. Inhaling on the lift. Now I talked about being overstretched in our shoulders, right? Where a lot of us tend to have pain. But there is a time and place for stretch. I think earlier on in my yoga journey, when people said shoulder pain, I would have cued a threaded needle, where you drop one arm to the mat, your temple. This is great. It feels like a good shoulder stretch, but remember, we're overstretched in this area. But after we've done these exercises for mobility, counterbalance, and stability, these are going to serve a greater purpose. For some of us, we will need that stretch. For others, it's just going to round out our practice and balance our bodies. That functional movement that we just did is actually going to improve the quality of some of these stretches. So take your left hand back down, right hand up. See, we're just countering naturally. And we'll do the same on the left. And the benefit too is when we're properly warmed up, I'll hear people say like, oh, my back cracked here. It's like they almost get an alignment. So they're getting the most benefit. We know we found strength and stability. We've kind of laid the foundation for things we need to do long-term for our pain. And then we get that immediate sort of relief and rinse. And we'll come back up. Always taking a moment to neutralize in your spine. You might rinse things out with a cat-cow. So there's the 4-part approach that involves mobility, counterbalance, stability, and finally stretch. Thanks for joining. If you like the content, please subscribe.